All right. Hello, Idiots on Parade, the two ugly for TV podcasts, the vodcast version, the bonus version with my musician friend, Barrett Antar Goodwin. Hello.
Hey, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you, heart surgery friend?
I'm all right. I feel like I'm looking at myself here and I look like death warmed over because I'm not sleeping very well. I have a crazy amount of energy. Like, I feel good, but my body's tired. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like my body's resting even though my mind is alert. So,
Makes sense.
anyway,
Do you
yeah.
ever
But other than that, I'm good.
do you ever take waking naps?
I don't even know what that means.
I
So,
sit in
maybe?
a lounge chair for maybe 10 minutes, close my eyes, and my mind is active and I can't fall asleep, but I do just rest my body and I feel recharged after that.
Ah,
It's just sort of not even
yes.
a meditative, but just a
Yeah.
quiet zone.
Yeah. I have a few more weeks of R&R kind of, not chill and do nothing, but like nothing crazy strenuous. So half my day is spent laying around listening to music, studying music, listening to podcasts, taking online classes, doing whatever, but like doing something that is really low physical activity. I'm not doing
Right.
much physical activity these
You're
days at
doing that
all.
anyway.
You know what I mean? Yeah, like I walk to the grocery store and back because walking is really good, but that's the extent of it.
All
So
right.
yeah.
Well, anyone watching, musician Barrett Antar Goodwin had heart surgery a little while ago. That's what we're talking about. I am a comedian, Nathan Timmel, and we're old friends, and we're going to talk. And
Mm.
today we have a couple ideas of paths to go down. And it began with a weird dream I had, which I don't really remember the details of, but I remember the starring characters. I was a bartender back in the day and in college, and I worked at a place called Benjamin Briggs in Milwaukee, which is long since gone. And there was a waitress there who I thought was really attractive. Not thought, she was really attractive. I was attracted to her physically, but I didn't, it wasn't like, oh man, if only she would date me. I liked her, but that's what it leads into, is insecurity. She was really attractive, but I never really. So how do I put this? I always thought, like, wow, she's out of my league. There's no way I would ever end up with someone like her. Um, but there was a line cook who was a scuzzy guy, as line cooks tend to be. They're not front
No
of.
offense to any line cooks watching.
Yeah, I mean, the Ryan Reynolds movie Waiting. There's a reason they put Dane Cook in fake tattoos and made him a little. They're not waiters for a reason. They're usually work release, or going to trying to test for their GED. You know who you are, line cooks. There's a reason you're not a chef. Spend the rest of the podcast shitting on line cooks. Anyway, this guy, he was a goofy scuzzy, and he'd talk to me during downtimes and be like, "Oh, she's so hot, man. I want to, I'm gonna hook up with her. I'm gonna hook up with her." And I kept thinking at the time, you're delusional. She is so out of your league. There's no way you'll ever hook up with her. And as far as I know, they never hooked up. But as I got older, and the dream I had them in it, like, wow, why am I thinking about this old restaurant? I don't remember the dream, but I remember the coming away from it going, who cares if he was delusional? To have that kind of confidence, I was insecure and just automatically taking a look at her and going, nope, she would never be with me. Look at me. I've seen me. I know. And he was going, yeah, I can get that. I'm going to go for that.
Yeah.
And I wish I had had a tenth of his confidence back in the day.
Hmm.
And it also made me remember, this was about the same time in my 20s. I'm not going to name them. A different restaurant I worked at, were they both from the same restaurant? One, yeah, they were a different restaurant I worked at. I actively remember making the decision that I'm not going to hit on women anymore because of the final two rejections that broke the camel's back, the straws, the where I wasn't going to become an incel, but I actively remember having the thought, I'm going to let women approach me, because that way at least I know they're interested, because I'm tired of getting rejected. I'm tired of, like, hey, I think you're kind of cool. Do you want to hang out? Nope, not with me. Of course not. Why would you want it with me? Look at me. I'm me. I got tired of that. And I got really fucking lucky in that it worked for me, in that my last 3 girlfriends and wife approached me. Now it was easy because I was on stage being a comedian and yappy. So they'd like look and go, oh, okay, I can talk to him. He's real. But you can't really do that as a software designer, or maybe you can with Tinder if you just put yourself on a dating profile and see who responds. But it all stemmed from insecurity. I got tired of rejection and I didn't want anything more to do with it. And only as like now, an adult, and I don't call myself an adult in my 20s, only now do I realize, A, I got really lucky, and B, I wish I'd had more confidence in my 20s. And I think it stemmed from being a teenager and moving a lot and losing friends every time I moved. And I haven't really wrapped my head around it, but there's something in there that just made me say, no one's ever going to be interested in me. So don't try, wait for them to, approach you.
Well, a lot to say about that, but like I would argue that I believe, I don't know if this is true or not. So whatever, right? I make this shit up as I go along.
Yeah.
I believe that much of insecurity comes from not having your needs met at critical points in your life when you're a kid. Like meaning like you're often forced to put your needs secondary to other people's needs, right? And that makes you kind of believe that you are not as good as they are. Because when that shit happens to you at a young age, even if it's something simple like there's an emergency going on, but you have this other thing that for as a kid is an emergency to you, but there's a legitimate emergency going on, and somebody tells you no to go deal with your little sister's real emergency, you feel like your sister's more important than you because you're 5. You know what I mean? Or 6 or 10 or whatever. And that's a silly example, but I think that there's something about, like for me, what I would call my insecurity was that it was my extreme willingness to allow for my needs to become second, to be second. You know what I mean? And I can absolutely remember how that happened. Like I can look back now as an adult and see how that happened. But just because I know how it happened doesn't mean it's necessarily easy to undo all of that. Like it takes a lot of conscious effort for me to undo a lot of that stuff I learned between 0 and 10 at the ages at which you believe in Santa Claus. Like, you know what I mean? Like when we look at our like the shame for me generally seems to come from looking back at my child self and thinking, how could you have fallen for that? Or how could you have believed that because of this, right? But that's me looking at through it as an adult and remember, like, you have to learn to, like, this is where forgiveness comes in, right? You have to forgive yourself.
Yeah, which we
because again, you would have believed in the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, fucking.
Let me jump in for 1 second.
Yeah, man.
Because you said something, I don't want to let it get away from me. You said as an adult you look back and it takes a conscious effort, and it does, because slipping into old habits is the easiest thing in the world to do. Yeah. You can be absolutely aware of a problem, no matter what the problem is, internal, external, and you can acknowledge it, but to confront it and deal with it, that does take effort. So I don't think there's any shame or blame in saying that it takes daily effort to overcome what you were just saying, any childhood bullshit, because it's not bullshit, it's very real. And if that gets ingrained in you, and even as you're saying that, I think of all the shit in my childhood, getting abducted by my father when the divorce was going to happen. I was used as a tool to keep my parents together. As I already mentioned, moving constantly and losing my friends, and then I'm just spitballing here, and I thought it was going to be a short interrupt, but now I'm just vomiting. when I got to seventh grade, I moved to a small community. And oh, this is funny. I got an email from an old high school classmate like 3, 4 weeks ago. He said, Nathan, do you even remember who I am? And I wrote back honestly, said, I remember your name. I do remember who you are. I don't remember you, but it's not you. I don't remember much. And she wrote back and said, I was just wondering because I didn't move to Oconomowoc until seventh or eighth grade. And by then, the hierarchies had already been established. This small community had already built everything in kindergarten friendships. And I moved
Absolutely.
in seventh grade. So I, all the way through my senior year, like 6 years later, still felt like an outsider because,
Right.
and I carried that with me into my 20s. Like, all right, this group of people don't accept me. Now that I'm gone and in a different city, why would I just carried it with me. Why would anyone accept me? Why would, yeah, wow.
Hmm.
Therapy
Yeah.
with Antar Goodwin.
There you go. But no, I mean that's some interesting stuff. Now let me ask you this: how do you find, right? Like there's a saying, something like if you want to get if you want to succeed, get used to the taste of failure, right? It's something like that. Like you're gonna fail forward, right? Is the modern term that you hear like all the people talk about is failing forward,
I
you know?
hate to go political, but yes, Donald Trump failed all the way into the presidency. I mean, did nothing good for anyone, and yet failed to immense success. I apologize. Let's not go political, but that was the
But
point.
well, that's funny because I there's a lot to say about that too. But but no, I think and there's something to be said for that. You know, like learning how to play guitar and working on slide, like being a drummer and then a bass player and then a bass player who plays guitar on a good level has kind of taught me that like, you know, once you learn, it's like languages, you can do multiple things, right? But what I have learned is that for me, you have to be willing to go through that suck period when you know you suck. The benefit of like learning how to play when we were teenagers is that we didn't know we sucked.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like you might think, oh, whatever, I'm worthless and blah, like whatever teenage angst you have, right? But like it's arguably the music that makes you feel better about yourself because you know you're killing it.
Oh,
Even though you know
was
what
the
I mean?
lifesaver when I was a teenager was being in a heavy metal cover band because
Yeah,
that
exactly.
was the group that accepted me. Like
Right.
when the outside
Exactly.
world did not
Right.
accept me, I found a home
Right.
in.
Yeah.
I think I told.
Yeah.
Why would I tell you this? Because but you go to a Slayer concert back in the day, and you'd go into a mosh pit, and people would be throwing elbows, and you'd be having fun. But the instant you hit the floor, you had 10, 12 people grabbing you and picking you up. You
Oh,
okay? Good. And then shoving you again. Like,
yeah.
because nobody wanted anyone to get hurt. We were all
Yeah.
beating the shit out of each other, but it was, for lack
Right.
of another definition, controlled chaos.
It,
Heavy metal
yeah.
was my gang back then.
Right.
It was my
Right.
sound
It's how
system.
it's how it's how dudes dance with each other. You know what I mean? You know?
As opposed to
No,
slow.
I mean I remember I remember Melvin McKnight was in a band called New Breed and they were killing. They were fantastic. Him, a guy named Dusty, and a bass player Jason Martin. They're fucking fantastic. And they opened up for Bad Brains one day.
Hmm.
So I went to go see them, and I remember taking off my shirt, jumping on the stage, just whew, jumping backwards. Complete and utter strangers caught me, moved me around the crowd, put me down. You jump in the mosh pit, and you're getting fucked up. Everybody else getting fucked up, and
Yeah.
it's true. The minute you hit the ground, that same Doc Martin that was about to kick you in the head, it's like some tattooed hand comes down and grabs you and pulls you. Goes, "You okay, bro? All right, cool," and then throws you back in. It's just like I was like, oh my god, man. And there was no, and I know there's a lot of like, again, we don't need to go down this path. I know there was a lot of racism and shit that went on back in those days, but I never felt it at those shows. I never felt like the skinheads I knew were really cool people.
Well, from
You know
what
what I mean?
understand, and this is all speculation, I heard, and this could be complete bullshit and I could be proven wrong. I heard it got bad in the 90s where
That could be
started
true.
to be violent and the skinheads starting, because there are two kinds of skinheads. The original skinheads were anti-racist.
Hmm.
I actually know at least one that was an original skinhead, that was, an anti-Nazi skinhead, and then somehow that did get co-opted and turned into racist and bad.
Yeah.
But the 80s metal scene, there was casual racism, because there was always casual racism, but what you're talking about, I think it got hardcore where it got evil later on, the longer it went
Hmm.
on, where
Maybe. Well, anyway, yeah, I think your point is valid. Like, I remember, not that being a musician the way I was, like, yeah, I mean, to a degree, it was like all the misfits found a home because our instruments got along.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Which somehow made us get along, which made us overlook the fact that, like, one of the guys has a mohawk, one of the guys is a dark skinned cat from forgot what country he's from, in Africa, with a shaved head. There's me, an African American, my next door neighbor, like a white kid with long hair. And you know what I mean? Like it somehow, none of that shit mattered because we all made music together. And none of that, like, literally none of that shit mattered. And it's true, that was the place in which I felt the most at home and the most accepted and the most able to be me. To come full circle, we sucked, but we didn't know it. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't fucking know it. Like, we thought we were killing it. We play our high school and shit, and people would love it because they didn't know any better either. You know what I mean? But we sucked. We were terrible. We were
I
awful. You know what I mean?
Gene Simmons said this. He said, "You get into music to get laid," and I don't think that's entirely true, but I do remember when the band I was in played our high school. I mean, we packed it. We promoted the shit out of it. We went to schools that were 30 miles away, and we packed it. From like, hey, you're a teenager and you're bored on a Friday or Saturday night, whenever it was, come to this school and see a band. And all I remember the takeaway is, and I still didn't get laid after it. You're on West Coast stage, everybody coming to see the band, and when it's all over, it's like, yeah, you go back to the.
I had a friend who said, if you can't get laid after your gig, your band sucks. And I was like, oh, dude, yeah. That's some shit that'll give you some insecurity, though, right? Because if you believe that and then you don't get laid after a gig, it means you suck, right? Like, then all of a sudden, acceptance of who you are is contingent upon somebody else, right? Like, in a weird way, right? Like, it means that, like, if this woman doesn't say yes to you, you actually aren't good enough. That's
Well,
what that says, which is crazy. What a crazy thing.
I'll go you one further. And I agree with you, because I'm not going to go into any of the details because it would take too long. But and I'm going to change the name. The first real relationship I was in with Judy,
Right.
when she left me, that in my mind proved that no one would ever love me. She was a
Yeah.
visual representation, or not a visual. She was the manifestation of what I'd been telling myself my whole life. No one will ever love you.
Yes.
And then so
Yes.
when she sort of hooked up with me and then went, nah, I'm done with you. I'm going to go off with this guy because he's better than you. That's, that was it. That hit home with everything that had been, like, no one will ever love you. Everyone's better than you. This is why women reject you. This is why you have no friends. I mean, it was probably, I don't know about the law of attraction, but if I manifested it or brought her into my life so that I could get over that hump, because after that, that's when I went into therapy for a couple of years and learned that it wasn't her really breaking my heart. It was my whole life leading up to that point that I needed to get over. So she was just again, another straw that broke the camel's back, but in a very ultimately healthy way. Because once you talk about
Yes.
relationships and power dynamics, if you're giving 60, 70% always, as opposed to, always fluctuate between 50% on each side, 60, 40, 55, 45. But when one person's always giving more, the power dynamic is off. And I don't know where I'm going with this other than, yeah, it's not a healthy relationship.
Well, it's you're putting your needs secondary to somebody else's.
That's where I was going with that. I knew you had said
Yeah.
that. Thank you. That's what brought it
Yeah.
home.
And I can remember actively doing that and thinking to myself, well, they shouldn't have to deal with this. I can handle it. I can handle the whatever it was. And I somehow felt it was noble. Like it was a noble thing to put my needs second. And I can remember times where I wanted to put my needs first and somebody said, that's really selfish. And I'd be like, oh wow, that sucks. I don't want to be selfish. But I was thinking, but your needs always come first. How does that not make you selfish? Like, how does it make me selfish when I do it, but when somebody else does it, they're just standing up for themselves? And like, it took me a long time to see the hypocrisy in some of the stuff. Because again, this stuff starts happening when you're so young that you believe it. And if nobody challenges that belief, like, yeah, I'll stop because it'll just get tangential, if that's a word.
Well, I want to bring up a story that may embarrass you. And if it does,
Uh-oh.
no. But it also,
Uh-oh.
I don't want to say it embarrasses me, but the way I would talk to you today is so much different than the way I did talk to you back then when we were in college.
Sure.
I'm going to say a name, and then you can tell me whether or not it's okay to talk about this. I believe it was Melody. You remember her?
Yeah, I do. I don't. I do. I remember very much. I remember a lot about her. I remember how much time I wasted trying to woo her.
That's where I was going to
Whenever
go. Do you remember how you
know.
tried to woo her? You just went to where she worked and would hang out with her every day.
Oh
And
yeah.
I don't say this to be mean to you, but because I told you, you were her lapdog. You would go just keep her
Yeah.
company, and then she'd go out and fuck other guys or do whatever, date other guys. And I'd be
Yeah.
like, dude,
I
just
mean,
keep in the effort, show her you love her. And it's like she was, and I'm not saying that's the wrong advice for the right woman. Like if she had been someone that was interested in someone that doted upon her, it would have worked. But you would go hang out with her, and then she was just like, oh, it's so nice if you hang out with me. Okay, I'm done with my shift. I'm gonna go out with this guy. And then you'd come home and go, what's
yeah.
not working? And I'd be like, I don't know, dude, just keep putting in time. And as like you and I were stuck in I guess a shame spiral where you were doing something stupid. I was giving you horrible advice, and she was, I don't want to say taking advantage of you, but she
I
used you for
mean,
what you gave her.
yeah. I mean, and I can very much look at it. I could see exactly how it's not her fault. Like I could see how like everything I did was what you would do to be someone's good friend. It's
Yeah,
that kind of thing that like I don't want to say gives women the illusion that men and women can be friends because of course men and women can be friends, right? But like I think a lot of times when men are interested in women, they try to get in through the avenue of friendship, which I don't know is an actually. I mean, I know a lot of people end up being with their best friends and they say that their spouse is their best friend and all that other stuff. And I've had plenty of relationships that started off as friendships. And then at some point, something shifted and it turned into something else. So sometimes it is the right move. Do you know what I mean?
oh,
But
that's
I
what I said. I
think,
said if that had been the thing she responded to, it would have worked. And maybe she just needed to be more
but,
mature. Maybe you
but
needed
I
to be
don't,
more mature, more confident, more open,
I
more.
think that's what it is. I think that like, it's not about not being friends with a person. It's about having boundaries. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing. When I was trying to date Melody, I didn't have any boundaries. Like she had plenty of boundaries, right? But I had zero. You know what I mean? And so because of that, I think that like, and it's not even just men and women. I think it's just people in general.
Absolutely.
If you don't establish boundaries, people don't always respect you. And it's very unconscious. It's not like they think to themselves, I don't respect this person, but like if you are always available, you never have anything going on and you do whatever they want, no matter what, whether it pains you or doesn't pain you or whatever, there's something about that that just like doesn't garner respect, even though people can really like you and even love you. I don't know that they respect you. Again, I don't know that that's true or not, but
It is, and I'm going to give
you
a
know,
horrible example, and I apologize for this. Um, I may have thought differently as a teenager, but as an adult, I remember watching Pretty in Pink and just being, there's no way Ducky ends up with her. There's no way Ducky ends up with her. Like as a
right,
teenager, you think, but he did everything right. You know, Ducky was,
right, exactly,
Molly
right,
Ringwald was Melody, and you were Ducky, and just always there and always the best friend, and like, hey, I like you so much. But when you watch as an adult, you're like you just said, you don't respect Ducky at all. You're like, Jesus Christ, dude, you're annoying. Okay, you were
right,
just this little
right.
yippy puppy that no one would end up with.
But it's a real problem because like you're kind of taught verbally, right? Not visually, right? Like I can look back throughout my years and I can see that the kind of men that most of the women were attracted to growing up, like not women, like girls and boys, right? Were dudes who they didn't have to be mean, but they had boundaries. They said no occasionally. They stood up for themselves when they needed to, right? Like, and it's like that's not like they didn't have to be mean. I always thought it was like you had to be an asshole, but there was a point in my life where I thought that kind of standing up for yourself meant you were an asshole, right? Like telling somebody else no or something like that meant that you were being somehow like in the wrong. I don't know. I mean, I do know how I learned those lessons, right? I do know, but but like verbally we get told that it is noble to do make sacrifices or these certain things, right? All these stories talk about how this person sacrificed this for this, or I mean, in my mind that's what, like, what's the movie with the angel gets his wings and
Oh,
blah blah
with Meg Ryan
blah.
and Nick Cage.
No, It's a
It's a
Wonderful
Wonderful
Life. Is
Life.
that right? Like I always look at that movie and I think, right, like the guy makes all kinds of these crazy personal sacrifices for everybody around him, and that's what makes him the hero of the story, right? Is his ability to sacrifice his desires to get out of the town and do different things and have this other life to in order to be this person for everybody else, and that's portrayed as this noble thing. And there's so many movies that do that, that portray like humility as nobility and like
Yes,
poverty
but
as like what gives you strength and all kinds of stuff, you know?
the beauty of It's a Wonderful Life, though, is that it's only at the end that he gets his reward. It doesn't happen in his 20s or they're in like he is
Right.
so beaten down by life. Like you said, he has sacrificed his whole life. And only when push comes to shove does everybody come through. It's not a matter of every day, like, hey, you
Right.
sacrificed.
But I mean, but let's be honest.
But I'm
That
saying you
might
have to
be the
get to that point.
problem.
I'm not.
But that might be the problem. Like
Oh,
in real life, does that happen? Like in actual life, you make all the sacrifices
I
and
just
you do
crossed
all
my
the
legs and I
stuff.
have a huge Charlie horse and I am in pain. I apologize. Oh my, I wish I could have walked this one off and like just paid attention to you, not interrupted, but oh, everything just locked up in my calf. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. It happens.
Old bones. All I do is cross a leg and everything. Okay, I am so sorry. Continue. I am so
But
sorry.
like in real life, does that happen? It's like that's what I mean. Like we grow up on these stories where being the noble sacrificial person, you get your rewards. It's also the same thing they told black people, not everybody. You get your all the poor folks, all the disenfranchised folks, right? Don't worry. Now that you've accepted Christ into your life might be horrible here. You might be the worst of the worst here, but when you die, you go to heaven and everything is great. So don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Right? Like we get these messages, and again, you learn them as a kid, you ingrain them. And I mean, I must have been in my early to mid 20s before I actually started developing real boundaries. You know what I mean? And
Oh, I
putting
didn't not
myself,
until early
you
30s.
know,
That was, yeah.
I mean, yeah, like I can say that and it happened largely because I was hanging out with a bunch of people who were kind of just worthless. Not worthless, but like it felt good to be the guy who had gone to college and was kind of smart and could do some things and could play around a bunch of people who had their own crazy deficiencies. But I could feel it's like why you watch Jerry Springer and shit, because it makes you feel
Yeah.
superior,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And it wasn't that because these people were genuinely my friends, right? But and they're not bad people. It was more just like we were kids and we were all just stupid. You know what I mean? But I can remember hanging out with women and having like sometimes the cats who were just like the worst people ending up with a woman that I liked repeatedly. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? And I was like, I'm doing something wrong. Like, there's something that's going on here that I'm doing wrong because out of a clear choice, she made this one. And
Yeah.
then another one made that one, and another one made that one. And I'm like, I must be doing something wrong. You know
I
what I mean?
shining example for me, and I apologize for this to anybody watching, was Sandra Bullock and Jesse James, the tattooed freak. Is like
Hmm.
the instant they hooked up, I'm like, huh, she's America's sweetheart at the time. She's this, uh, why? And then I really hate to say this, but when it all fell apart, I'm like, yeah, okay, I get that. Like, that's what every guy saw coming from the beginning. Every guy looked at Jesse and said, we know him. We know his character. We know who he is. And so when he cheated and said, oh, I cheated because I was insecure. I can't believe I landed Sandra. So it was like Sandra, whatever. And it was like, yeah, but it just, that was the one that it took me a big, huge celebrity wake up to say, okay, sometimes I don't want to say sometimes women may make bad choices, but I'm not sure how else to phrase it. Sometimes.
I mean, I think here's the thing. I think that young people make bad choices.
Thank
You know
you.
what I mean?
Thank you.
I
I
don't
take
think
back
I
women
don't,
make bad choices. That was
yeah,
a incorrect statement.
yeah,
People all make bad choices. That's
yeah. Especially when you're young.
and here I
And
am
you
having
know,
5 minutes ago talking about Judy, who I knew would damage me, and yet I chased after and sacrificed for until I was depleted and had to go into therapy.
yeah.
Bad choices. Very dumb.
Yeah, yeah, you just made and you made bad choices, she made bad choices. It's just that's what being young is not it's not about, but it kind of is. Like
It
you
is.
you make a lot of bad choices until you learn how to make good ones. It's
And
there was a
that's what I
stupid
was just going
meme.
to say is hopefully you learn, because otherwise
Yes.
I know people in their 30s and 40s who are still making bad choices. And it's like, come on. I mean, at some point you have to
Yeah.
grow and
I
learn
mean,
and develop as a person.
but things get habitual. Do you know what I mean?
It
Like
goes back to what we talked
it
about
just
at the
becomes
beginning. It's
habitual,
easier
right? Like
to stay in a pattern than it is to break out of it.
and that's the really and oftentimes what it takes is somebody to teach you.
Hmm.
Like that's often what it takes is somebody takes you and teaches you the right way to manage your money. Like if you don't know how to do that, then it's not just enough to want to be able to manage your money. Again, it's like just because I understand where the root of my insecurities and shame where they started, I get it. It doesn't mean that just because I understand it, automatically my insecurities and shame vanish, right? You
Yeah.
still have to go back and excavate and go through the stuff, and it's painful and it's hard, and nobody actually wants to do it. It's like, again, because it's like what started half this with the music and the teenager thing is like the hard part about learning how to play an instrument as an adult is you have to go through that suck period, but you suck, right? Whereas when you're a kid, you don't know you suck. So it's okay to go through that period because you're just completely oblivious until you realize later on in life when you're actually good that, wow, I really sucked back then. But
Yeah.
in the time, you have no fucking idea. You know what I mean? Like you just have no idea. And as an adult, you do know that you suck. And so you have to take hundreds of shitty solos, maybe even on stage in front of people to get to where you actually know how to take a solo that's good, right? Like you got to go on stage, start off okay and fall flat on your face. Come home, practice a little bit more, go back and do it again and again and again and again and again and again until it takes you till you can go longer and longer without falling on your face. You know what I mean? And then you just have to do that over and over and over again until you can actually stand for the whole song. Then you can run through the whole, then you can do backflips and you just don't fall down. But that time might take a couple of years, and you're painfully aware of it. It's like something you said in the beginning when we're talking about all this stuff. I wonder, because between men and women have all kinds of insecurities as it surrounds sex and marriage and relationships and boyfriend girlfriend stuff, and we just have all kinds of stuff. Men have their stuff, women have their stuff, right? But do
Usually the
you
same stuff.
find, yeah, it is, it's exactly the same stuff,
I
right?
think it might boil down to what I said earlier. I don't think I'm unique in the slightest with that nagging, no one will ever love me. I think that's probably pretty
That's
universal
most people. Yeah.
and very sad.
Yeah, just most people, but I think many people aren't aware of it because they bury it with whatever their vice is. You know what I mean? But I wonder, when you get outside of the realm of intimacy and interpersonal close relationships, right? Romantic relationships, right? Do you find that when you do comedy, you have that same sense or that same feeling, or like, because rejection is just part of the game, right? Like, for every 100 clubs you email, you might get one gig, and sometimes you may get 10 gigs, and maybe sometimes you get 50, but like, it's all just a numbers game. Like, you just go over and over and over, knowing full well that half the people aren't even going to look at your shit, let alone the ones who are going to look at it and say no. Do you know what I mean? Do you find that, like, in that area, you're much more okay with accepting rejection as part of the job?
Yeah, because this is going to sound going back to I'm the cook in this situation. Maybe I'm delusional, but I don't take it personal because I know they're not rejecting me. I
Hmm.
have a really strong sense that, like you said, they're not even looking at my shit. I'm
Yeah.
gonna tell you two quotes, and this is just comedy specific. Back in the day when you would actually send a packet with a DVD in it before everything was
Hmm.
digital, I stopped at a club to do a guest set, and we're talking to the manager owner. I'm like, "Hey, I sent you a press kit. Did you get it?" And he's like, "Hey, listen, let me show you something." And he showed me like a small stack of press kits. He's like, "I get at least 10 of these a week." And I'm like, "Okay, so that's two a day. You can't open two," but I didn't say that. But to even drive, but I knew he wasn't opening them. He would just get it and set it on a stack. So he wasn't even. It was easier for him to just like hire people he knew, and then whoever he knows can bring another comic, like, hey, you're hired, bring someone to open for you. That is still done
I
today. And then the other
when
story I'll tell you really quick is there's a club that went out of business, that before it went out of business, the owner said to me, I can guarantee that 90% of the people living inside my own zip code don't know I'm here. I can also guarantee, this was in Illinois. It was a small club in a small town in Illinois. He said, I can also guarantee that 100% of the comedians in Miami know I'm here because they all email me looking for work. I mean,
hmm
so I know that's what I'm up against when it comes to
yeah,
getting rejected. I don't take
yeah,
it personal because I know, one, they're overwhelmed, and two, a lot of them don't work really hard. A lot of them aren't in it to like find the
but
next biggest and greatest talent. They're just in it because it's what they
but
chose to do.
though, but here's the funny thing. Todd,
Mhm.
Todd Gardner, there was a point at which he was booking music at Deltas, right? This is a kind of a soul food restaurant slash music venue that I used to play, right? It's owned by two friends of mine, and he's really good friends with them as well. So there's a point at which he was handling the music. And I remember going over to his house one day just to record something for him or whatever, and there was just stacks of CDs, just stacks. And I said, "What's all this, dude? Seriously?" Because he's a vinyl guy. He's a DJ. He's a vinyl guy. You know what I mean? I was like, "What is all this?" He goes, "This is all people who want gigs at Deltas." And he had been doing it for 3 weeks or a month. And like, yeah. And I said, have you listened to all this stuff? He goes, I tried. And that's the thing. In the beginning, you listen to everything because you
Yeah.
think you might be missing something really good. And then after a month of listening, and like 98% of it is just utter garbage,
Mm-hmm.
just utter garbage, right? You stop listening and you call your friends.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Like you listen, and a couple people got lucky because they caught you in a window where you were interested, and every now and then some package comes in and it's packaged just nicely, and you're in the right mood, and the stars aligned, and you had your fruit smoothie or whatever, and you just open it up, and it happens to be good, and those people get a gig, right? Like it does happen. You know what I mean?
I haven't thought of this in years. Again, the club is gone. God, I wish more of these clubs would last. I was working at the guy emailed me and said, "Hey, I liked your press kit. I'll hire you. Come on out and work the club." And I did. And he was driving me to morning radio. He said, "I'll pick you up at the hotel," because it's a lot of clubs do that because you don't know that this was before GPS. So they would just say, and plus they don't trust comics who, aren't morning people. So you've got to do morning radio at 6 a.m. I will come get you and take you to the morning radio. We're driving and he had a DVD player in his car. And he flat out told me, he said, what I do is I get these press kits, and whenever I'm driving around, I just pop in the DVD. And as I'm driving, if it makes me laugh or if I like what I'm hearing, then I'll look at the rest of the kit. And he said 9 times out of 10 or even more, he said, I just take the DVD out and throw it out the window. He said flat out, he will just throw it out the window.
Right.
And I worked at a comedy club. And I'm still friends with this woman. I'm still friends with her. Again, comedy club is gone, hasn't been around in years. But she was the I don't want to say receptionist because they didn't have a receptionist. Whatever, front of like there was the general manager, and then there was his personal assistant. Like she had no power. She's the ticket girl. Like it's not a hierarchy like an office, but. And she was the one in charge of, she just went about her day. And she said, I put it on in the background. And if I heard people laughing, then I'd look at it. And then I'd sort of watch it if I really caught my attention. And she called me and said, like, so I get which hump you have to make it over. I mean, they are not sitting down in front of the thing like, all right, let me watch this comedian.
No.
They're putting it on in the background and you have to grab their attention from that to begin.
Yeah. And
that's if, as you said, they're watching it in the first place.
Right. And they have to also be in a good mood.
Yeah.
Right. Because like plenty of times people will send me music to record over, like, oh, put a bass line on this, whatever. And if I'm in a bad mood when I open up the file, because I always open it up just to see what it sounds like, to get a mental map of what my workload's going to look like, And if I'm in a bad mood, like, oh, this isn't that good. Then when I'm in a good mood later on, I'm like, oh, ready to go do that thing. I'm like, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought. Like that's the problem. Is like your ears and your sense and is largely based on your mood. So the person's got to be in a good mood, ready to do this. Like all these things have to align for them to want to like Katie and I went through that when we were booking tours and stuff. To book a 3-week tour takes months of time. At least for us, because and it's just hundreds of emails trying to route it and do all this. It's not, and most people don't even open up your email because I mean, like if you got 50 CDs a week, you get 500 emails. You know what I mean? Like holy shit, dude. Yeah, it can't be easy.
One last story for you. I haven't thought of this in years. I still have the email somewhere. Guy emailed me 3-something a.m. and there were spelling errors, and I don't think he meant, maybe he mentioned in passing, like maybe it's because I've been drinking, but I don't get what you're doing. And it's like, yeah, you're putting my DVD in at 3 a.m. after a long night of doing whatever, and you've been drinking, and then you thought it was a good idea to email me with the timestamp, like, I don't get you. You're not that funny. Like, thanks. You're the guy in charge of my career, not in charge of my career.
No, but he's one of the gatekeepers. He's one of the gatekeepers. Yeah, dude. Yeah, that shit is real. So, I mean, again, to tie it all around, I feel like when you said, I'll wait for them to come to me, you're right. That works because you stand on stage. It works because you stand on stage, right? If you did not do something where people could get to know you, see something, because I've had that experience where like I'll play a gig and someone will come up, a woman will come up to me like, "Oh my God, you guys are so good. Can I buy you a drink?" Right? And I'm like, "Oh, that's really sweet of you." You know what I mean? And I'll say, "The club gives us free drinks, so let me get you something." You know what I mean? Or whatever. Like, and but like that's a real thing, right? When Melvin and I were running into New York, we were thinking about moving to New York. So we got like these jobs in the fashion district. We're doing like sample sales, which is, I guess, when all the designers take their samples and put them out for sale for people. So models would come in all the time and just walk around topless and just throw shit on the ground as if like, it's completely ridiculous. Like, but it was a fun little gig, right? And we got paid cash. I think there's a lot of shady shit going on in those things, a lot of shady shit. Um, but like in that job, very few people approached us. Like, hey, what are you guys doing after your shift is over? And I'm not saying
I'm
that
gonna buy
it's
this
like some
top
kind
and
of
then I'm gonna fuck you.
right. I don't know that there's some hierarchy of like it's not a value thing. It's just a different thing, right? If you're standing on stage in front of a good number of people, they're all focused on you for a certain amount of time, and there's a connection that they feel, so they can walk up to you and say something. Whereas, like, even if they wanted to, if you're, you know what I mean, like, I
Well,
don't know
I
that
said I got
they
lucky
would,
and then
you
it
know what I
worked for me.
mean?
There's, as I
Yeah,
said all the way back then, if I was in IT, it in any situation, a workplace situation, even before all the harassment regulations we have today, it takes a lot of courage for one person to approach another person and say, "Hey, I notice you when you get your morning coffee. Uh, you want to get coffee with me?" I mean, putting yourself out there is humbling. It can be humbling
yeah,
unless you have a great thick skin or an internal apathy that allows you
right.
to just like be heard, hear the word no and go, yeah, I'm okay with that.
But do you remember this guy wrote a book called Rejection Proof? I think he had like a startup company that he started, and the company was and like the angel investor, whatever, was listening to it and listening, and at the final moment said, "No, we're not interested." So the guy was like, "Holy shit!" And he was crushed, and like for weeks and months, and like all of a sudden he put all his money in it and everything, and he realized at a certain point that he couldn't take rejection. So he decided he was going to go start asking people to do things
Oh,
that were crazy that he knew they would say no to.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Right.
gave you that book. I didn't
That's
remember it's
the
called Rejection Proof, but yeah.
yeah. And right. And it was actually really interesting because what he found is that like while some people said no, many people said yes. Once he really asked in a reasonable manner, people started to say yes to him. And
But
I
I
was like, oh, that's interesting. But he also got used to hearing no, and it stopped bothering him so much, you know?
yeah, but I also remember reading. I enjoyed the hell out of the book. I remember enjoying it, but I also remember um, rejection is there are degrees
Mm,
because I still, even after reading the book, there's something different between what he did was go into a donut shop and say, "Can you make donuts like the Olympic rings?" Or he would go knock on a random door and say, "Can I plant a plant in your? Can I dig a hole in your backyard and plant a plant? I want to put this tree, whatever it was." And I'm like, yeah, that's all easy shit. You tell me to walk up to a stranger and do something stupid. If they say no, I'm fine. Like
yeah,
I'll go anywhere and knock on a door and say, "Hey, can I water your plants? It's for a scavenger hunt." And if they say no, I go, "Okay." But that's a
right.
lot different from, okay, I need $1 million for my seed money for my company, and or I've had a crush on this girl for a month. I'm finally gathering up the courage to. I mean, rejection from the girl you've had a crush on for a month, that will destroy you, but will make you stronger faster than the other ones. Maybe it's a matter of baby steps and you hear no enough that the big no's don't mean anything. But I think there's a big difference between a no that doesn't matter and a no that resonates with you.
Yes. I will say if we're talking about women specifically, there was definitely a point in my 20s where I said, okay, when I see a woman and I feel intimidated, that's the one I will approach.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Because I realized, I think I'd read some book where one of the former presidents realized that fear was holding him back, and so he started like doing his like tackling his greatest fear, sleeping in the woods by himself overnight and doing this. And I think in the end he ate a rat or something just absurd. Like, and I was like, okay, that's a bit extreme. Like
Yeah.
he cooked it or whatever, but still, that's a little extreme. But I remember that. Now again, this is in the days when you could go to a club and talk to a woman and it wasn't like, I don't want to say it wasn't harassment. It was kind of just like, and not that like they loved it or hated it, but they got to be the judges of whether or not it was harassment or creepy or good, depending on what how their response. You know what I mean? Like it was a weird thing. Like if they're like, "Oh, get away from me, creep," well, that's harassment. But if they're like, "Oh, of course you can buy me a drink, stranger," you know what I mean? Then that means it's okay, right? And I don't know what whether it was wrong or right. Like these days, I wouldn't do it. You know what I mean? I wouldn't do those same things because I would just assume I would be wrong. Which I don't know how people are supposed to meet each other. Like I have
I
no
guess it's all
fucking
apps
idea.
these days.
I mean, really, like, and I'm not saying that because I think that harassment is bullshit. Because I think the harassment is very real. And
I
I
agree.
imagine, like, I talk to women and they say now that we get to wear masks, and shit, like no dudes are like smile honey and all that dumb shit. So like I get it, like there's tons of women who are super happy that they get to wear fucking masks, and you know when they go places because people leave them the fuck alone. You know what I mean? So like I get it. I can say that back when we were younger, that's just kind of how people met. You know what I mean? Not that it was okay, but it's kind of like, and I don't mean to sound like when people go, well, you know, we called them coloreds when I was a kid. It's just what you called them. You know what I mean? But they're also not wrong. You know
Well,
what I mean? Like
I
as
mean,
stupid as it sounds, that is what they called them back. They called them, you know, those
you
people,
let
right?
me jump in here. I think it's just a matter of, and this is age. I think, um, is it a movie or a book or an album? The Kids Are All Right. Was that a Who album? Or is that a,
I want to say yes.
that was a movie? Either way, the kids are going to be fine because they will grow up in the world. I mean, it's old people that lament change, that say, "Oh, back in
Yes.
my day, we did this, and how are kids going to do it?" Kids are just going to grow up, and it's going to be normal to them.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
why you and I touched on in passing, and we don't need to go into detail or depth on this. I see on Facebook like, "Oh, what is coronavirus doing to the kids?" And I'm going to do my
Mm.
best not to make fun of this woman or belittle her. Joe Biden did a town hall meeting in Milwaukee, Wisconsin recently, and one thing that made the news was a mom had her 8-year-old girl uh, there, and she said, "My 8-year-old girl asks me, Mommy, am I going to get coronavirus and die?" And Biden's response made the news, which is, "No, honey, please don't worry. Everything's going to be fine." And people say that the kids are getting destroyed by this, and it's like, no, you're destroying your kids. I've got 2 kids. They're 6 and 8, and they're fine because it's all in the approach. If they see you, oh my God, we're going to get coronavirus and die. We're going to get coronavirus and die. That's going to be instilled in them. My kids,
Hmm.
why do we have to wear a mask? It's coronavirus. We have to wear it until they say we don't. Oh, okay. And then they put the mask on. Kids are malleable. They are accepting. And if
That's
you
true.
treat everything as fear, then they will feel it. We're just telling them that coronavirus is a disease and we have to make it
But
through, and that's that. And so when it comes to dating, kids will grow up and, oh, I have to use an app. Okay. Oh, I have to sign a contract that says, I'm going to approach you and ask you on a date. Check here for yes if I can ask you, like whatever it will be,
right.
that will be
But
their
I
norm.
mean, but do you think that then the a lot of the real issues are generational issues, right? Like if you and I grew up in a time where like I mean, dude, my god brother grew up in Newark in the hood, right? And his approach to women was walk up to them, take what they're drinking out of their hand, take a slurp out of it, and give it back to them and tell them whether or not he thought it was good or not. And then they would start laughing like it was funny. And I was just like, what the fuck is going on here? And then he would get the woman's phone number. And 2 days later, I'd hear them up in my bedroom having sex. And I was always just like, what the fuck? Now, is that harassment? Obviously. In a modern context, that's obviously harassment. To walk up to some strange woman, take some drink out of her hand and drink it. But I don't know that that woman was offended by that. Do you know what I
Well,
mean? No, she could have been, but like I don't know how to say this without sounding ridiculous because maybe it is partially generational. Like when people go, well, those are the coloreds. Oh, that colored boy. She's friends with the colored boy or the colored kid around the corner. But like I don't know when I read the words of black people, I don't hear a lot of black people being angry at the word colored, except the ones who grew up when black people were called something different. And then we have the national advancement of the organization and the NAACP of colored people, right? It's like, right, like it wasn't actually a horrible thing to be called a Negro
no,
or to
what's
be
the other one?
called,
The United Negro College Fund, is that still a thing?
right,
Yeah.
right. So you're right to be called a Negro, to be called colored. But now if somebody called me colored, I'd be like, what, who the fuck are you talking to? Like, is that a generational thing? Do you know what I mean? Like I wonder, like, because the same thing is true with now I don't that doesn't mean that harassment is generational, right? Because I'm sure there are plenty of women back then who would have my godbrother would have approached them and they would have felt like attacked. But if you know what I mean,
Well, let me
like
jump in because
I don't know. Like
I
it's a
want to use
weird thing, you know what I mean?
I want to use your own explanation for you. Um, I think it's just a personal thing where I said that stupid thing where I said women make bad choices and you said people make bad choices. And I went, yes, it's a personal thing. And this is very stupid because it's a cartoon, but it was a very insightful cartoon. It had a lot of good. King of the Hill. Um, Hank wanted Bobby to hang out with Boomhauer and learn how Boomhauer was such a ladies' man because Bobby was, Bobby. And what Bobby learned and was turned off by, I wasn't turned off by it when I saw it. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Was that Boomhauer hit on every single woman? He just walked up and was like, and either it worked or it didn't. And it didn't work 90% of the time, 95% of the time. But the 5% of the time it did work, it worked. So I am not forgiving your god brother, but say 95% of the women were offended and felt harassed and were like, fuck you. Um, the 5% it worked on were the ones you heard him banging in your room.
I
It's just a
mean,
personal thing. Like, who knows how many times he
absolutely.
struck out with that approach?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also just it's in some ways it's cultural. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
And,
I
and
don't know this for
generational. I don't think you're wrong about
right,
generational. I think
right.
what we try and do is paint broad strokes and say, we're all people. We should all think the same things. We should all believe the same things. And with this homogenous bullshit we're trying to preach these days, we forget that there are different ways of living life, and there were different ways, generational, cultural.
Yes.
Shit's different, and
Yeah.
hopefully it changes and grows better, but it doesn't
Yeah.
mean you judge what came before and condemn it unless it was outright sexist, racist, homophobic, wrong, evil,
Right. And some
anti.
of it was, but like if you but like I don't know this for a fact. I've never been there. My understanding is that if you're in Italy in the middle of summer and you're walking down the street and you're a good looking woman, the men hoot and holler and say all kinds of things. And I don't know that those women like it or don't like it. I don't know. But my guess is that when it happens in this country, women don't always like it. But when it happens over there, I don't know that it is the same as what we say here, right? Like there was a woman I met at a party who has a biracial daughter. The woman is white, her daughter's father is black, and mother is the white woman. And that biracial child fell in love with the dude in who's from Senegal, I want to say. And they had a kid and they now live in France, right? and the woman who's basically African American, the biracial woman, she's American, right? So when the Black Lives Matter thing happened, she was like all about it. And the mother was telling me that the husband
Before.
didn't give a shit. He was like, "Oh, that's nice." And the daughter, and she and the daughter really pissed off that he doesn't see this. Now, I'm not saying that like, there's not violence against people all over the world, but like in his mind, he was like, those are black people, those are African Americans. That's not me. I'm this, you know what I mean? Like, and he's not wrong, right? Like, do Black Lives Matter all around the world? Oh, sure they do. Like like sure, everybody's. Well, I don't mean like all lives matter as some kind of retort, like ridiculous thing, but like life matters, right? Life matters all around the world. Just life matters, right? But
Only
at
way
the
the
end
other
of the
would say is
day,
lives matter. The way you look at
right,
humanity is.
right. But the truth is that like the Black Lives Matter movement is a specific movement, as far as I can tell, for African Americans, which means that if you are a dark skinned Brazilian cat, it doesn't necessarily, like, not that it doesn't apply to you, but it doesn't apply to you until you land in this country. No,
But the,
that's not to say like I don't know what Brazilian racial politics and stuff are like. So like, but the thing is that like there are cultural differences between the way we interpret things, and we interpret them through a cultural model, which may not always agree with your next door neighbor's cultural model to look at the same situation. Do you know what I mean? That's, I
I mean,
guess, my point.
you've said this a couple times in the podcast. You've said African American, and the new thing being taught in racial sensitivity classes is black with a capital B, because I mean the African ancestry is so old at this point that it's no, just black, and
But
so it's shifted in our lifetime. I mean,
right.
from I don't remember the order: Negro, colored, African American, black. It's forever
I think
shifted.
it was Afro American,
I
then
remember that. I
African
forgot. Yeah.
American, and then yeah. But I mean, the thing is this, and this is the thing that bothers me the most about it. And I don't mean to sound again like these stupid people who call themselves patriots, right? Like, but Black history isn't Black history; it's American history, right? Like calling it Black history and making it an optional class for people to take, and then calling something else history.
Making it separate.
Right. It's like they
Separate.
were happening, right. They were happening simultaneously. And so if you just teach American history, just not from one perspective.
Right.
And it's not about George Washington Carver and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Paul Robeson. It's about the day-to-day lives of Black people who just lived their lives and did profound things with them. And maybe they did some stuff here, maybe they did some stuff here, but like when we look at when we look at the history of this country, we isolate a few of the important players, but there's a lot of ancillary stuff that you hear about. Well, the farmers did this and they did this and blah blah blah. It's like just start talking about, just weave in African American history with American history, so it's just history because we're all Americans, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that like I get why African Americans wanted it, because you have the Italian Americans, the Irish Americans, the German Americans, the Japanese, like everybody got to claim where they were from, right? So African Americans, so Black people were like, hey, we want to be able to claim this too, right? But like at the end of the day, white people are just considered American. You know what I mean? Like after a certain standpoint, be German American if you want to be, but you're just an American, right?
Well,
And
that's
I
why I
think,
always make the joke that I'm cracker American or hunky American. I
right, you're
put that in
right,
front of just to put something
right.
stupid.
Yeah. And I think that, like, for me, that's my, if we're going to end this whole thing on the race thing, that's where my my thoughts come in. It's like when we watch the people, like, we'll talk about, so like they storm the Capitol and they do this and they do that, and everyone's like, or even that woman, Central Park Karen woman, right? Like, who said all that stuff about that guy, and then everybody said, well, she took these 5 hours of racial sensitivity, and now the prosecutor dropped the case. And I'm like, well, like, that's just another example of white privilege. I'm like, maybe, sure, looks like it, but how about we say she lost her friend, she lost her house, she lost her job, she lost everything that she held dear because she did something that was fucked up, and then she took 5 hours. Like, that's a transformative experience.
And what
Like,
were they
you
supposed
know,
to put her in jail for that? I mean, I'm not saying she
right?
doesn't
I
deserve
mean,
punishment, but I don't know how
right,
racial sensitivity training seems to be the correct approach. You did something that was wrong. We're going to teach you to be a better person, not you did something
right,
wrong. Now let's punish the shit out of you, which is already happening at
right,
the societal level.
right.
And here, I'm going to go out on a ledge here. I'm going to make a leap. And I've got it in my head, so it's going to take me some barfing up to get correct. And I might speak out of turn. I'm going to guess that these same people that say Black Lives, not black people, the same white liberals that say Black Lives Matter and champion black people, are the same people who, after Michael Vick got out of prison, said he's a dog killer. He doesn't deserve to be in the NFL again because he went back to the NFL. It's like, once you have served your time, no matter what it is, do we not forgive? Michael Vick
Right.
went to prison. I hated what he did, but you know what? He went to prison. He was punished. Let him play in the NFL again. People were so upset by him playing in the NFL. She did something horrible. She is being punished on a societal scale, deservedly so on some levels. Even the guy that she called 911 on said she doesn't deserve to have her life destroyed. He's more forgiving than everyone else. But yeah, she knows she did something wrong, and I guess I don't know. Do maybe she should, maybe instead of having the charges dropped, I automatically think prison. She should do racial sensitivity training, and then probably 500 hours of community service would have been more appropriate. I think
Yeah.
people want to get vindictive and punish, but I think she could have done some community service on top of the training.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. The question is, at what point is she not our sister? Right? Like, at what point do we no longer care about her? Like, at what point is she no longer a human? Like, at what point do we decide treating her the way we feel like she treated him? At what point is that okay? Right? Like, at what point do we say, okay, like, her job is gone. She had a great job, fucking gone. Right? She had a house, she had stuff that is all gone. And right, like, isn't the point to be education? And if she learned, why don't, like, at what point do we say, okay? Do you know what I mean? And let her back in the game. You know what I mean? Like, what do we, you know?
Two thoughts. The first thought is, when was the last time, and I'll just ask you personally, when was the last time someone screamed at you, treated you like complete shit, and you went, huh, I guess I should be a better person because they're yelling at me? It doesn't really happen. That's not how it works. And then the second thought I had is, I actively heard on a podcast yesterday or the day before, it's been 6 years since Rachel Dolezal got in trouble, and she just gave an interview where she said she still can't get a job. Now, I'm not forgiving what she did, but at the same time, 6 years of, now if she's still standing the same ground, I am a black woman, I identify. I don't know the whole case. I'm just
I
saying.
mean, yeah, it's dangerous territory, though.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if she can't she, like, I know why she can't do it, but then we get into all kinds of arguments where then why do, like, where do you draw the line at what you're allowed to identify in
Right.
because of how you feel? Like, is there a line there? Because clearly, if there is, she crossed it.
Or
Right?
she's been honest and said, I'm a white woman that wants to teach black studies because I feel this strongly about it, as opposed to pretending. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, at what point do you
part of
stop
what I
destroying
would
people's
say
lives?
is was she doing good? Like, I don't think she did it because she was some spy for the man, right?
You're onto us.
Like,
Shit. Get
right,
Rachel out. Get
like,
Rachel out. They bust you. We
right,
had her
like
on the inside.
I think she actually was doing good. Like she was head of an organization that is designed to do good, and she didn't get there by doing a shitty job. Like I don't think she got the job because she was quote unquote a light skinned black woman.
I guess she's
Maybe,
still doing
but
good.
I
She's
think
working as a
she did the
freelancer.
fucking job.
She's still working
Yeah.
as a freelancer, filling out grants for black-owned businesses. Like she's
Right,
still.
I think she's actually really fucking good at her job. So at a certain standpoint, you got to ask yourself, like, yeah, what she did was stupid and fucked up. But oh god, it's like so touchy. This stuff. It's like
We've been canceled for
color.
everything else we've said in our
I
lives.
know,
But also, is it? And I
like,
don't mean this in a joking way. Does she have a mental illness that needs to be addressed? I mean, what made her do that?
I
Or
mean,
is
that could
labeling her
be.
mentally ill because she identifies as black, does that make me insensitive now and I get canceled because I'm not respecting
Right.
someone's? I
I
have
mean,
no
but
idea.
here's the thing. My guess is that, right, like most of the like racism exists in all communities, right? Like we can talk about all the racial shit that happened to me at the hands of white people, but we can also talk about all the racial shit that happened to me at the hands of black people. Telling me I was too dark or too this or too that, or if I speak this way instead of this way, then I'm this and not that, right? Like there's all kinds of that. There's things. And so as a white woman, she would not have been able to rise up through those ranks. I don't think, even if she was as good as she is.
Yeah.
I think it's like people lying about having a college degree and then going on to be the best professor at the college. You know what I mean? Like without lying, they couldn't have gotten in, but they did lie to get in. You know what I mean? But then they went in to do a really good job. Like it's like a weird thing. Like I think she's an asshole, and I think that there's other ways for her to have done what she wanted to do without lying, and I think it's kind of ridiculous, right? So I get why they fired her. One, because it's just it's just humiliating to be like get duped like that. You know what I mean? Like that's got to not look good for your organization, right? But at the same time, 6 years is a long time to bench your star player. You know what I mean? Like, not to say that she was the best in the organization, but she was the best in that version, in that little microcosm.
Yeah.
So, like, how long do you bench your star player because they're an idiot? You know what I
And
mean? Again,
I touched
I
on this
don't
because
know I don't really know the details. I really
right.
don't. I just know
That's
the
just
basics.
what I was going to say is I don't know if she is acting in the same way, which is I want to get my job back as a black woman, or if she wants to move on with her life as a repentant woman, someone that begs forgiveness and said, "Look, I did something really fucked up. Here's how I'm going to make it right. Let's move forward with me trying to do good by my mistake." It seems like we're stuck in this mode of fuck everybody for life, for eternity, because of what they did, even if what they did was pretty fucked up, like the Central
Yeah.
Park here. And I'm not forgiving either thing they did, but how much is enough? And in Central Park, Karen, maybe she didn't do enough. Maybe getting racial
Right.
sensitivity without community service, that's not enough. And I guess I don't know what Rachel Dolezal has done. Has she made amends? Has she moved forward, or is she just being punished for 6 years because she's standing her ground? I don't know. But if they're actively working toward making right, then we should forgive. If they're not, then I guess they're on their own. I have no
I
idea.
mean, the truth is that like without some remarkably public act of forgiveness, the
Yeah.
world doesn't know, right? Like we forgive all kinds of white
Public act of
supremacists
contrition.
yeah, yeah. I thought that's what it was, and I didn't want to use the word because I wasn't sure I was going to be using it right. But yes, I I feel like we forgive white supremacists who say they've seen the light and write books about it and get on all the talk shows. We
Yeah.
forgive those guys all the time, right? We forgive people who were in gangs, child soldiers, all kinds of people because they had no choice, right? Like they were just it was baked into them through their where she was. I don't know that what was baked into Rachel Dolezal. You know what I mean? I don't know, but I also know that as far as I know, she did a good job. Right. And it's like the Michael Vick thing. It's like, yeah, the guy did something really fucked up, but he served his time.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to say that the prison industrial complex works, then it means that when people get out, you have to let it go. I heard in England that they do that. Like I heard in England, I don't know, I saw it on some English cop show, so whatever, it could be not true. But like when you're out of jail, you're done. You served your time and you're done, and they don't hold it against you. Like you can go get jobs and do shit, you know what I mean? And it's nobody's fucking what is yeah, exactly.
Prime Minister.
But you know what I mean? Again, I don't know if that's true because whatever. It's like the London version of fucking Law and Order. You know what I mean? Some shit like that. You know. So who knows, right? But
Well,
it is. It's an
Google it
interesting
for us
thing.
and
You know
tell
what I
us,
mean?
and we'll talk about it next week
Yeah,
because I think we're
absolutely.
bumping up on quite a bit of time.
Yeah, we are indeed. So anybody who made it this far, Nathan will send you a free CD.
It's on Spotify. You just. All right.
Yeah.
AntarGoodwin.com is where you can find my friend, probably on this side, even though I'm seeing him right there. He's probably over there on the screen, the reverse image. You can also find him as the musical director at katiehenrymusic.com. She's got one album out, High Road. They're working on the second. I can be found at nathantimmel.com. And we recorded this on February 18th. So as I post it, you have a week next weekend, the 25th, 26th, and 27th. I will be in Cuyahoga Falls at the comedy club, The Funny Stop. So if you are anywhere near there, Akron, Cleveland, anywhere within a decent radius, come on down to The Funny Stop. All right, my friend, good seeing your face.
Yeah, you as well, man.
Continued recovery for you.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Get some sleep if you can.
And yeah, man, get this freaking luggage from under my eyes. Jesus Christ, it's like I'm going on a trip somewhere. My God.
Any unusual?
Yes, I can do that. Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.